The horizon's edge hummed with the familiar rhythm of deep space travel, its corridors alive with the chatter of a dozen different species. Kai Brennan preferred the quieter sections, the maintenance decks where the only sounds were the gentle thrum of life support systems and the occasional hiss of atmospheric recyclers. It was here, 3 levels below the main crew quarters, that he'd first noticed her watching him. Vela moved with a grace that seemed impossible in the artificial gravity. Her people, the Aetherians, were known for their ethereal beauty, tall, willowy beings with luminescent skin that shifted between pale blue and silver depending on their mood. But Vela was different from the other Aetherians aboard. Where they maintained the aloof dignity typical of their species, she smiled, especially at him. "The thermal coupling on Junction 7 is fluctuating again," she said, appearing beside him as he worked on the plasma conduits. Her voice carried the musical quality of her people, but softer somehow, more intimate. Kai looked up from his diagnostics pad, startled. In 3 years aboard the horizon's edge, he could count on one hand the number of times crew members voluntarily sought him out during maintenance shifts. I noticed. Should have it stabilized within the hour. May I assist?" She knelt beside him, her movements fluid and purposeful. This close, he could see the subtle patterns of light that danced beneath her translucent skin, like aurora trapped under ice. "You don't have to. I know you're off duty." Kai's hands trembled slightly as he passed her a neural spanner. Their fingers brushed, and he felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the ship's heating systems. "I enjoy the quiet here," Vela said, already working on the coupling with practiced efficiency. "And the company." They worked in comfortable silence, their movements synchronized as if they'd done this countless times before. Kai found himself stealing glances at her profile, the way her silver hair caught the corridor lighting, how her brow furrowed in concentration. "On Athetheria," she said suddenly, "we have a saying, the heart speaks loudest in silence. I think I understand it better now." "What does it mean?" Kai asked, genuinely curious. Aetherians rarely shared cultural insights with other species. Vela's skin shifted to a warmer blue and she smiled. That particular smile she seemed to reserve only for him. "Perhaps someday I'll tell you properly. When the timing is right." Later in the crew mess, Kai sat alone with his protein ration and synthetic coffee, watching the stars stream past through the observation windows. He was lost in thought when a tray appeared across from him. "Mind if I join you?" Vela asked, though she was already settling into the chair. She'd changed from her work coveralls into the flowing gossamer robes typical of her people, but somehow she made even the common mess hall feel more welcoming. "Of course." Kai gestured to the empty chairs around them. "Though you usually eat with the other Aetherians." "Usually, yes." She broke off a piece of her meal, something that looked like crystallized fruit but probably wasn't. "But tonight, I wanted different company." They talked about everything and nothing. The ship's course toward the Kepler Nebula, the strange habits of their human captain, the way different species interpreted the same stellar phenomena. Vela laughed at his dry observations about ship, life, and Kai found himself sharing stories he'd never told anyone. As the mess hall emptied around them, Vela leaned forward slightly. "Kai," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "do you ever wonder what it would be like to truly know someone? Not just their words or their work, but their essence." The question hung between them like a bridge neither dared cross. Kai met her eyes, deep violet pools that seemed to hold starlight, and felt something shift in his chest. "Every day," he admitted. Vela's smile this time was different, knowing, sad. "Good," she whispered. "Hold on to that feeling." The weeks following their first real conversation blurred together in a haze of stolen moments and growing intimacy. Kai found himself looking forward to his maintenance shifts, knowing Vela would appear beside him with tools in hand and that soft smile on her lips. She never explained why she helped him, and he never asked. Some things were better left unspoken. It was during his 3rd week of fighting the Alteran flu that everything changed. Kai had been trying to work through the Fever, his pride refusing to let him admit weakness. He was hunched over a diagnostic console, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air, when the world tilted sideways. Kai. Vela's voice seemed to come from very far away. Strong arms caught him before he hit the deck, and suddenly he was floating. No, being carried. The Aetherian strength that their graceful appearance belied was evident as she lifted him effortlessly. "I'm fine," he mumbled, though the words felt thick in his mouth. "You're burning up," she replied, her voice tight with concern. "And you're talking nonsense. The infirmary is full with the outbreak, so you're coming with me." Vela's quarters were larger than his, befitting her role as the ship's xenobiologist, but it was the personal touches that surprised him. Soft fabrics that seemed to shimmer with their own light, plants that definitely weren't from any human world, and a faint scent like ozone and starflowers. "I shouldn't be here," Kai protested weakly as she lowered him onto her sleeping platform. The surface molded itself to his body, somehow both firm and yielding. "Hush." Vela's hand touched his forehead and he gasped. Her palm was cool against his burning skin, but more than that, he could feel something else, a tingling sensation that seemed to sink into his bones. "Etherian healing touch," she explained softly. "It won't cure the flu, but it will ease the fever." For 3 days, she tended to him. She brought him broth that tasted like nothing he'd ever had, sweet and complex with flavors that changed as he swallowed. She sang to him in her native language, melodies that made the air itself seem to vibrate with harmony. And when the fever dreams came, she held his hand and whispered reassurances until the darkness passed. On the 3rd night, when his fever finally broke, Kai woke to find Vela curled beside him on the sleeping platform. She was still wearing her day clothes, but exhaustion had finally claimed her. In sleep, her luminescent skin pulsed with a soft, steady rhythm that reminded him of a heartbeat made of starlight. Without thinking, he reached out and touched her face. Her skin was impossibly soft, warm in a way that seemed to radiate from within. She stirred at his touch, violet eyes opening to meet his. "How do you feel?" she asked, her voice husky with sleep. "Better," he said, and meant it. But he didn't move his hand from her cheek. "Thank you." "You don't need to thank me," she whispered. I couldn't bear to see you suffer." Something in her tone made him search her face. "Vela, why did you help me?" "Really?" She was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her words were barely audible. "Because you matter to me, more than you know." The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken words. Kai's thumb traced along her cheekbone, and he watched her skin shift to a deeper blue, the color of twilight. "You matter to me too," he said. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. "Kai." "I know," he said, though he wasn't sure what he knew exactly. Only that this moment felt fragile, precious, and entirely too brief. They stayed like that until dawn cycle, not speaking, not moving, just existing in the space between friendship and something deeper. When the morning chimes sounded, reality intruded. Vela sat up slowly, her expression unreadable. "I should go," Kai said, though every fiber of his being wanted to stay. "Yes," she agreed, but made no move to leave the platform herself. It was another week before he was cleared for duty. When he returned to the maintenance decks, Vela was waiting for him with a neural spanner and that smile that made his heart skip. "Feeling better?" she asked, as if those 3 days of intimacy had been perfectly normal. "Much," he replied, falling into step beside her. "Though I think I owe you dinner. Something better than sick broth." "I'd like that," she said. And for the first time since he'd known her, Vela's smile reached her eyes without that underlying sadness. That evening, they met in the observation deck during gamma shift, when the corridors were empty and the stars seemed close enough to touch. Kai had managed to procure actual coffee, not the synthetic stuff, and Vela brought those crystallized fruits that weren't quite fruits. "Tell me about Athetheria," Kai said, as they settled on the viewing platform. The vast cosmos spread out before them. Vela's expression grew distant. It's beautiful. Cities that float among the clouds, connected by bridges of light. The sky changes colors with the seasons, and at night, you can hear the planet itself singing. It sounds incredible. Do you miss it? Every day, she said, but her eyes were on him, not the stars. But I found things here that I never expected to find. Like what? She reached out and took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. Like the way you see the universe. Through your eyes, even the most mundane system diagnostic becomes an adventure. Like the way you listen, really listen, when I speak about my world. Like the way you make me feel. How do I make you feel? Kai asked, his voice rough. Like I'm home, she whispered. Even among the stars. Later, as they walked back to their quarters, Vela stopped outside her door. Kai, she said, turning to face him. What I said earlier about mattering to you, I meant it, he said firmly. Every word. She nodded, but that sadness was back in her eyes. I want you to know that this, us, it's not something I take lightly. Among my people, we're very careful about who we allow close. I understand, Kai said, though he wasn't sure he did. Do you? She stepped closer, and he could see the patterns of light beneath her skin shifting like a slow aurora. Because once an Atherian opens their heart to someone truly, there's no going back. It's not just emotion, it's a bond that transcends physical existence. Kai's breath caught. Vela, what are you saying? She reached up and touched his cheek, just as he had touched hers days before. I'm saying that I'm falling in love with you, Kai Brennan, and that terrifies me more than any void storm or alien plague ever could. Before he could respond, she was gone, her door sliding shut behind her with a soft hiss. Kai stood in the corridor for a long time, her words echoing in his mind, his heart pounding with a mixture of joy and something that felt dangerously close to hope. The alarm klaxons shattered the artificial night like a scream. Kai bolted upright in his bunk, his training taking over even as his heart hammered against his ribs. The ship's emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red, and the deck vibrated with the ominous rhythm of a cascade failure. All hands to emergency stations. Reactor breach in progress. This is not a drill. The words sent ice through his veins. Reactor breach meant they had minutes, maybe less, before the horizon's edge became a brief new star in the cosmic dark. Kai was pulling on his emergency gear when his door chimed. Vela stood in the corridor, her face pale but determined, already suited up in engineering whites. The breach is in Section 12, she said without preamble. Main engineering is sealed off. They need us to manually override the containment protocols from the auxiliary control room. That's a suicide run, Kai said, but he was already moving, grabbing his toolkit and emergency respirator. The radiation levels will kill us in about 30 minutes, Vela finished, unless we can get the dampening fields back online first. They ran through corridors filled with emergency personnel and frightened civilians. The ship shuddered around them, and Kai could hear the growing whine of containment systems pushed beyond their limits. At the auxiliary control room, they found chaos. Half the systems were offline, the other half reporting cascade failures. There, Vela pointed to a junction box that was sparking and smoking. If we can reroute power through the secondary grid, I see it. Kai was already moving, his hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. But someone needs to hold the manual cutoffs while I work. The radiation exposure. I'll do it. Vela was already moving toward the radiation-flooded section. No. Kai caught her arm. Your people are more sensitive to hard radiation than humans. Let me. Kai. She turned to face him, and in her eyes he saw something he'd never seen before. Absolute certainty. My people are also more resilient in ways yours aren't. And if we're going to die today, I want to die protecting you. The ship bucked violently, and somewhere in the distance they heard the sound of bulkheads failing. There was no time to argue. They worked in desperate synchronization, Kai's hands flying over the control systems while Vela held the manual overrides in place, her skin already taking on the sickly green tinge of radiation poisoning. The containment field flickered, stabilized, then began building strength. It's working, Kai breathed, watching the power levels climb. 5 more minutes and the explosion came from behind them. Not the reactor, something else. The shock wave slammed them both against the far wall, and Kai felt something in his shoulder snap. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard Vela cry out. She was pinned under a fallen support beam, her legs trapped, silver blood seeping through her clothing. The radiation readings were climbing again. The explosion had damaged their makeshift repairs. Go, she gasped, her luminescent skin flickering weakly. Finish the job. I'm not leaving you. Kai tried to lift the beam, but with his injured shoulder, it was impossible. There has to be another way. There is no other way. Vela's voice carried the authority of someone who had accepted her fate. The containment field is failing. If you don't stabilize it now, everyone dies. Go. Kai looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the truth in her eyes. She was right. But looking at her, broken and bleeding, he also saw something else. Something that made his chest tight and his hands shake. He loved her. Completely. Desperately. Hopelessly. And he was about to lose her. I love you, he said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. Vela, I love you. I should have said it before. I know, she whispered, and her smile was radiant despite the pain. I've always known. Now go. Save our ship. Kai forced himself to turn away to focus on the control systems. His hands moved with desperate precision, rerouting power, stabilizing the containment field, bringing the reactor back from the brink of annihilation. Behind him, he could hear Vela's labored breathing, and he worked faster, tears streaming down his face. The field stabilized. The reactor readings returned to normal. The ship stopped shaking. They'd done it. Kai spun around to find Vela watching him, her skin now so pale it was almost transparent, but she was smiling. Well done, she breathed. Hold on, Kai said, falling to his knees beside her. Medical is on the way. You're going to be fine. Kai, she said softly, reaching up to touch his face. We need to talk. When this is over, when I'm healed, there are things I need to tell you. Things about my people, about why I'm really here. Whatever it is, we'll face it together, he promised, taking her hand in his. Something flickered in her eyes. Pain, but also something else. Something that looked like regret. I hope so, she whispered. I really hope so. The medical team arrived. Then, and Kai was pushed aside as they worked to free Vela from the debris. As they carried her away on a hover stretcher, she looked back at him one last time. Remember what I said, she called out, about timing being everything. It wasn't until later, much later, that Kai would understand what she meant. For now, he could only watch as the woman he loved disappeared around the corner and wonder why her smile had looked so much like goodbye. 2 weeks after the reactor crisis, Vela was released from medical with a clean bill of health. Etherian physiology, the doctors explained, was remarkably resilient. The radiation that should have killed her had merely weakened her temporarily, and her bones had healed with typical alien efficiency. Kai had visited her every day, bringing her books and synthesized flowers and stories of ship repairs. They'd talked about everything except the words he'd spoken in the auxiliary control room. The crisis had revealed his feelings, but it hadn't given him the courage to speak them again. Until tonight. He found her in the observation deck, as he'd known he would. It was their place now, the spot where they'd shared their first real conversation, their first meal together, their first tentative steps toward something deeper. She stood with her back to him, silhouetted against the stars, her posture strangely formal. Vela, he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, and he saw that she'd been crying. The tears of her people were like liquid starlight, leaving faint trails of luminescence down her cheeks. "I was wondering when you'd come," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "I should have come sooner." Kai stepped closer, his heart pounding. "I should have said this sooner. What I said during the crisis, I meant it. Every word." "I know," she whispered. "I've been thinking about us, about what we could be." He took another step forward, close enough to see the patterns of light beneath her skin. "I know there are differences between our species, complications we'd have to work through, but Vela, Kai, stop." Her voice was gentle but firm. "Please." He stopped, confused by the sadness in her tone. "What's wrong?" "I need to tell you something," she said, turning back to the stars. "About why I'm really here. About why I've been waiting for you to say those words." Waiting. Kai felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What do you mean?" Vela took a shuddering breath. "Among my people there is a tradition. When we reach our 25th year, we undergo a ceremony called the soul binding. It's a sacred ritual where we're bonded to another of our kind, permanently and irrevocably." "Okay," Kai said slowly, not understanding where this was leading. "The ceremony was supposed to take place 6 months ago," Vela continued, "but I requested a delay. I told the council I needed time to complete my xenobiological studies, but that wasn't the real reason." She turned to face him again, and in her eyes he saw depths of pain he'd never imagined. "The real reason was you," she said. "I was already falling in love with you even then. I kept hoping. I kept waiting for you to notice, to say something, to give me a reason to defy everything I'd been taught." Kai's breath caught. "Vela." "The delay expires tomorrow," she said, and her voice cracked. "A transport ship arrived this morning to take me home. The council has decided I've had enough time to indulge my curiosity about other species. The ceremony will take place in 7 days." The words hit him like a physical blow. "No," he said, stepping toward her. "No, you can't leave. Not now. I love you, Vela. I love you more than I've ever loved anything in my life." "Finally," she whispered, and her smile was heartbreaking. "Finally you say it." "I'll go with you," Kai said desperately. "I'll speak to your council. You can't." Vela shook her head. "The soul binding isn't just a marriage, Kai. It's a permanent psychic bond. Once it's performed, I won't be able to love anyone else. I won't even be able to remember what it felt like to love you." "Then don't go," he said, grabbing her hands. "Stay here, stay with me. If I don't return, I'll be exiled forever. Cut off from my people, my culture, everything I am. And more than that, my intended bondmate will be left incomplete. He'll never be able to love anyone else, never be able to find peace. I can't do that to him." Kai stared at her, understanding, finally dawning. "You've been waiting for me to say it first. If I'd said it earlier, if you'd said it 6 months ago, yes. I could have broken the betrothal, faced exile for love. But now..." She pulled her hands free and reached into her robes, withdrawing a small pendant that pulsed with soft blue light. "Now it's too late." She pressed the pendant into his palm. It was warm, almost alive, and he could feel something like a heartbeat in its depths. "What is this?" he asked. "A memory crystal," she said. "It contains everything I feel for you, everything I've wanted to say, but never could. Among my people, it's given as a symbol of what might have been. Vela, please." "I leave tomorrow at dawn," she said, stepping back. "I wanted you to know that these months with you have been the happiest of my life. I wanted you to know that if things were different, if I'd been born to a different family or a different world, I would have chosen you. I would have chosen you over everything." She turned to go, then paused. "And Kai, thank you for finally saying it. Even if it's too late, at least I'll know, in whatever small part of me survives the soul binding, that someone once loved me enough to break their own heart." She was gone before he could respond, leaving him alone with the stars and the weight of words spoken too late. In his palm, the memory crystal pulsed with the rhythm of an alien heart, and Kai understood that he was holding the physical manifestation of love that would never be. But as he stood there, watching the stars that had once seemed so welcoming, a new thought began to form. The transport didn't leave until dawn. The ceremony wasn't for 7 days. And sometimes love was worth defying the laws of entire civilizations. Sometimes love was worth everything. Kai didn't sleep that night. He paced his quarters, the memory crystal clutched in his fist, his mind racing through possibilities and impossibilities. By 0300 hours, he'd made his decision. By 0400, he'd accessed the ship's cultural database and learned everything he could about Etherian bonding ceremonies. By 0500, he was standing outside Captain Morrison's quarters, requesting an immediate audience. Morrison listened to his proposal with the patience of a career diplomat and the skepticism of someone who'd seen too many young officers make emotional decisions. "Son," she said when he'd finished, "what you're suggesting isn't just career suicide. It's potentially an act of war. The Etherians take their bonding ceremonies very seriously." "I know, Captain, but I also know that Vela doesn't want this. She's told me as much. What she wants may be irrelevant under Etherian law." Morrison poured herself coffee from a pot that had seen better decades. "But I'll grant you this. She's one of our finest scientists, and losing her would be a blow to the mission." "Then you'll help me?" Morrison studied him for a long moment. "I'll give you a diplomatic courier ship and a cultural attaché who knows Etherian customs. Beyond that, you're on your own. And Brennan? If this goes badly, I never authorized it." "Understood, Captain. Thank you." 2 hours later, Kai was aboard the courier ship Meridian, watching the horizon's edge shrink in the view screen. The Etherian transport had departed an hour earlier, carrying Vela toward a fate she'd never chosen. The journey to Athetheria took 3 days at maximum warp. Kai spent the time learning everything he could about the planet's customs, its laws, its history. The cultural attaché, a weathered diplomat named Chen, was pessimistic about their chances. "The soul binding is sacred to them," Chen explained as they entered Etherian space. "It's not just a ceremony, it's a fundamental part of their society. The bonds create a psychic network that links their entire civilization." "But what if someone is bonded against their will?" Kai asked. "The concept doesn't exist in their culture. The matches are made by the council based on psychic compatibility. They believe that love is, how do they put it? A pleasant coincidence that sometimes follows understanding. That's barbaric. That's cultural relativism, son. What we consider barbaric, they consider natural order." Athetheria was everything Vela had described and more. Cities of living crystal, floated among perpetual clouds connected by bridges of pure light. The sky shifted through spectrum of colors that had no names in human languages, and the air itself seemed to sing with harmonious frequencies. They were met at the spaceport by a delegation of Etherian officials, their faces politely neutral, in the way that suggested they were barely tolerating this intrusion. The leader, a tall figure whose skin shifted through shades of gold and amber, introduced himself as Counselor Thyron. "I am told you wish to speak regarding the bonding ceremony. Avela Thrisnellan," he said, his voice carrying the musical quality of his people. "This is irregular." "I understand the irregularity," Kai replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "But I believe Vela Thris, is being forced into a bond she doesn't want." "Want?" Theron's expression was genuinely puzzled. The concept of want is irrelevant to the soul binding. The ceremony creates perfect compatibility. She will be happy. "But she's not happy now," Kai pressed. "She loves someone else." A ripple of something, shock, dismay, passed through the Etherian delegation. Thyron's skin shifted to a deep purple, a color Kai had learned indicated distress. That is not possible," Thyron said. "She is unbonded. She cannot love." "But she does," Kai said, pulling out the memory crystal. "She gave me this. She told me it contains her feelings." Thyron stared at the crystal as if it were a weapon. If what you say is true, then she has violated the most fundamental law of our society. She has formed an unauthorized emotional bond with an alien species. What's the penalty for that? Kai asked, though he dreaded the answer. Exile, Thyron said simply. Permanent severing from the psychic network that connects all Etherians. She would be alone. Forever. But she'd be free to choose her own bond. She would be free to die slowly of psychic isolation, Thyron corrected. No Etherian has ever survived exile for more than a few years. Kai felt the last of his hope crumble. Either way, he would lose her. If she went through with the ceremony, she would forget him entirely. If she was exiled, she would die. I want to see her, he said. Before the ceremony, I want to say goodbye. Thyron considered this. That is acceptable. But know this, human. If you attempt to interfere with the ceremony itself, it will be considered an act of war. The temple where Vela was being prepared was a structure of living crystal that seemed to grow from the very air. Kai was escorted through corridors that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, past chambers where other Etherians in various stages of preparation moved with dreamlike grace. He found Vela in a meditation chamber, dressed in robes that seemed to be made of starlight itself. She looked up when he entered, and her face cycled through surprise, joy, and despair in rapid succession. Kai, she breathed. What are you doing here? Stopping you from making the biggest mistake of your life, he said, moving toward her. We can find another way. There is no other way, she interrupted, but she was crying again, those luminescent tears that broke his heart. You shouldn't have come. It only makes this harder. Good, he said fiercely. It should be hard. Love should be hard to give up. And what would you have me do? She asked. Accept exile? Die slowly while you watch? Condemn my intended to a life of psychic incompleteness? Come back with me, Kai said desperately. Live aboard the horizon's edge. We'll find a way to help you adapt to the isolation. You don't understand, Vela said, rising from her meditation platform. The psychic isolation isn't just loneliness, Kai. It's a physical degradation. My people are connected to each other at a cellular level. Cut off from that connection, my body will start to fail. I'll lose the ability to regulate my own biological functions. I'll die, piece by piece. Then we'll find a way to reconnect you, Kai said. There has to be technology, some kind of artificial network. There isn't. Vela cupped his face in her hands, her skin warm and soft and alive. And even if there were, I couldn't ask my intended to live incomplete for the rest of his life. He's a good person, Kai. He doesn't deserve that. What about what you deserve? Kai asked. What about your happiness? My happiness is irrelevant, Vela said, but her voice cracked. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, Kai finished. I know the logic, but sometimes the few have to stand up for themselves. Not here, Vela said. Not now. It's too late. The ceremony was to begin at sunset. As the Etherian sun began its descent through the color-shifting sky, Kai found himself standing in a gallery overlooking the main temple chamber. Below, hundreds of Etherians had gathered, their combined presence creating a psychic harmony that he could actually feel, a low-frequency vibration that seemed to resonate in his bones. Vela entered from one side of the chamber, her intended, from the other. He was tall and graceful, with skin that shifted through shades of silver and blue, and Kai could see immediately that he was a good match for her. In other circumstances, they probably would have been happy together. The ceremony began with a series of harmonic tones that seemed to come from the very walls of the temple. The counselors spoke in the ancient tongue of their people, words that carried power and weight and permanence. Kai watched as Vela and her intended stepped toward each other, their hands reaching out to touch, and then he saw her hesitate. It was the smallest thing, a fractional pause, a slight tremor in her hand. But in that moment, Kai saw the truth. She didn't want this. She was going through with it out of duty, out of obligation, out of the belief that her happiness was less important than the needs of her society. He was moving before he realized. it pushing through the gallery doors and down the stairs to the main chamber. Security tried to stop him, but he was faster, more desperate, more willing to risk everything for love. "Stop," he shouted, his voice carrying over the harmonic tones. "Vela, you don't have to do this!" The chamber fell silent. Every eye was on him, every face a mask of shock and outrage. But Kai only looked at Vela, who stood frozen with her hand inches from her intended's. "I know the cost," he said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was doing. "I know what it means for you to choose me, but I also know that you'll never be truly happy if you don't choose at all." "Kai," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I love you," he said, not caring who heard him. "I love you enough to let you go if that's what you truly want. But I also love you enough to give you the choice. Here. Now. In front of everyone." "You're asking me to choose exile," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You're asking me to choose death." "I'm asking you to choose life," he replied. "Maybe a shorter life, maybe a harder life, but a life where you're free to love who you want to love." Around them, the Aetherians watched in stunned silence. Kai could feel their collective shock, their outrage, their confusion. But he could also feel something else, a strange kind of hope, as if some part of them had always wondered what it would be like to choose for themselves. Vela looked at her intended, who stood with quiet dignity waiting for her decision. "I'm sorry," she said to him. "You deserve someone who can love you with their whole heart." "I deserve someone who wants to love me," he replied, and his voice was gentle. "Go, Velathris, be free." She turned back to Kai, her face radiant with love and terror and hope. "If I do this, there's no going back. I'll be exiled forever." "If you don't do this, you'll be lost forever," Kai replied. "At least this way, we'll be lost together." Vela nodded, her decision made. She reached into her robes and pulled out a small crystal blade, the ceremonial knife used to sever psychic bonds. Without hesitation, she drew it across her palm, letting her silver blood fall to the temple floor. "I, Vela Thrisnalin, reject the soul binding and choose exile," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "I choose to love freely, even if it costs me everything." The effect was immediate and devastating. Vela collapsed to her knees, her skin flickering and dimming as the psychic connection to her people was severed. Kai caught her as she fell, holding her as she convulsed with the pain of separation. "It's done," she gasped, her voice weak but filled with wonder. "I'm free." "We're free," Kai corrected, lifting her in his arms. "And we're going to find a way to make this work." As he carried her from the temple, Kai could hear the Aetherians behind them beginning to sing, not the harmonic tones of ceremony, but something else. Something that sounded almost like a song of farewell. Later, aboard the Meridian, as they fled Aetherian space, Vela lay in the medical bay, her condition stable but uncertain. The ship's doctor had done what he could, but Aetherian physiology was still largely a mystery. "Do you regret it?" Kai asked, holding her hand as the stars streamed past the porthole. "Ask me again in a year," she said with a weak smile, "if I'm still alive to answer." "You will be," Kai said firmly. "We'll find a way. We'll build our own network, our own connection. Just the two of us." "Just the two of us," she agreed, squeezing his hand with what strength she had left. It wouldn't be easy. The doctors gave her 6 months, maybe less. But they'd found each other across the vastness of space, across the barriers of species and culture and time. And sometimes love was strong enough to build bridges where none had existed before. Sometimes love was enough. In the end, as the Meridian jumped to warp and carried them toward an uncertain future, Kai held Vela close and whispered the words he should have said months ago. "I love you. Whatever happens, I love you." "I know," she whispered back, her skin flickering with the faintest trace of bioluminescence. Not the glow of her people's network, but something new. Something that belonged only to them. "I've always known." And in that moment, exile felt like coming home.